Overcoming Loneliness After 60 Practical Tips After 45 Years of Marriage. When John lost his wife, the silence in his home was absolutely deafening. At 68, retired from a job that had defined him for decades. And with his kids grown and building their own lives miles away, he truly believed the best chapters of his life were over. He felt invisible. The days stretched out before him, empty and vast, each one a quiet echo of the last. This is the story of how John went from feeling like his life was over to finding a new reason to get up in the morning. And it all started with a single, small step that anyone can take. Feeling lonely as you get older can be one of life's biggest challenges, but you are not alone in this feeling. In fact, research shows a huge number of adults, over 60, experience social isolation. But John's story proves that loneliness doesn't have to be a permanent state. It's a season. And like all seasons, it can change. Today, we're going to walk through the journey John took, breaking it down into simple, actionable steps. These aren't grand, sweeping gestures. They're small, manageable actions that built on one another, slowly but surely, to rebuild a life of connection and purpose. This isn't just John's story, it's a roadmap. Acknowledging the emptiness and planting a seed of hope. And maybe the hardest step John took was simply letting himself feel the full weight of his loneliness without judging himself for it. 4 weeks, he'd tried to push it away, busying himself with meaningless tasks, telling himself he should be fine, that he should be stronger, but the feeling was a persistent ache, a hollowness that seemed to fill the very space his wife, Mary, once did. He wasn't just alone. He was lonely, and realizing that distinction was key. Being alone can be a choice, a peaceful state. But being lonely is a craving for connection that goes unanswered. He finally admitted it one quiet afternoon, saying the words out loud to the empty living room. "I am lonely." Saying it didn't magically fix anything, but it did stop the internal battle. It turned a vague, overwhelming dread into a specific problem. And a problem is something you can start to solve. This is a step that mental health experts fully endorse. It's about practicing self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a friend going through a rough time. Instead of, "I shouldn't feel this way," it becomes, "It's understandable that I feel this way." Given everything that's changed, John started a simple practice. Each morning, before the day's silence could take hold, he'd sit with a cup of tea and a small notebook. He didn't force himself to write anything profound. He just wrote one sentence about something he was grateful for. Some days, it was as simple as the sun coming through the window. Other days, it was a warm cup of tea. This tiny act, a cornerstone of gratitude, slowly started to shift his focus. It didn't erase the sadness, but it created a small crack of light. It was his way of challenging the all-encompassing thought that his life was over. He wasn't trying to build a new life overnight. He was just trying to get through the day. And this small, daily ritual was the first plank in a bridge back to himself. Have you ever taken a moment to just sit with your feelings and name them? It's a quiet but powerful act. This acknowledgement isn't about dwelling in sadness. It's about giving yourself a firm foundation to build from. The first thread of connection, one small call after a couple of weeks of his quiet morning ritual, John felt a subtle shift. The blanket of despair felt just a tiny bit lighter. He was still lonely, but he wasn't completely hopeless anymore. He decided it was time for the next small step one he'd been avoiding for months. He looked at his phone, at the list of contacts that seemed to belong to a different man's life. He scrolled past his children. He spoke to them on Sundays, but those calls were often filled with the cheerful chaos of their lives, which somehow made him feel even more like a spectator. He kept scrolling until he found a name. Frank Miller. Frank was his old colleague from the factory. They had retired around the same time, but their lives had drifted apart. They hadn't spoken in nearly a year. John's thumb hovered over the call button. A dozen excuses flooded his mind. He's probably busy. It alielze awkward. What would we even talk about? This is such a common hurdle. That fear of rejection or awkwardness can be... But John remembered the choice was simple. The certainty of loneliness if he did nothing, or the possibility of connection if he tried. He pressed the button. The phone rang 3 times, and he was about to hang up when a familiar, gruff voice answered. "Hello!" John's heart pounded. "Frank?" "It's John Baker." There was a pause, And for a terrifying second, John thought Frank wouldn't remember him. Then, a laugh. "Baker, you old dog. I was just thinking about you the other day." "How the heck are you?" The relief was immediate and overwhelming. The conversation wasn't profound. They talked about their old boss, their aching backs, the terrible local sports team. It was simple, easy, and comfortable. They were on the phone for only 15 minutes. But when John hung up, he was smiling for the first time in weeks. That one call did more than just pass the time. It reminded him that his past was still part of him, that people remembered the man he was before retirement, before loss. Experts on aging and well-being often stress focusing on the quality, not the quantity, of your relationships. It's not about suddenly needing a calendar packed with social events. It's about nurturing a few deep, meaningful connections. That one call to Frank was a thread of single. Thin thread thrown across the chasm of his isolation. Later that week, Frank called him back. A new pattern began. Is there someone in your life you haven't spoken to in a while? An old friend, a former colleague, a cousin. Maybe making that one call could be your next small step. It might feel daunting, but as John discovered, the reward can be immeasurable. Rediscovering purpose through service, a reason to leave the house. The weekly calls with Frank became a lifeline, a small island of normalcy in John's quiet week. During one of their chats, Frank mentioned he'd been volunteering at the local animal shelter a couple of mornings a week. "They're always looking for people to walk the dogs," Frank said. "Gets me out of the house. You know, the dogs don't care if my knees are shot." The idea lodged itself in John's mind. Volunteering. He hadn't considered it. It seemed like something other people did, but the thought of a scheduled activity, a place he had to be, was strangely appealing. It offered structure, a stark contrast to his formless days. Studies consistently show that volunteering is one of the most effective ways for older adults to combat loneliness. In fact, research shows that people who volunteer regularly report feeling a greater sense of purpose and connection to their community. Hesitantly, John drove to the shelter. He walked in, feeling awkward and out of place. He explained he was a friend of Frank's and was interested in helping out. The manager, a busy woman with a kind smile, didn't ask for his life story. She just handed him a clipboard and said, "Great, we can always use another walker. Can you start Thursday?" That first Thursday was no, but then he was handed a leash attached to a goofy, three-legged retriever named Buster. As they walked around the park, Buster sniffing every single leaf, John felt something new, a sense of responsibility to someone other than himself. This dog was depending on him for this small slice of joy. He wasn't just retired John Baker anymore. He was Buster's walking buddy. He started going every Tuesday and Thursday. He got to know the other volunteers, a diverse group of people from all walks of life, united by their love for animals. They didn't talk about their past careers or their losses unless they wanted to. They talked about the dogs. They shared stories. They laughed. For the first time in a long time, John felt like part of a team. Volunteering gave him more than just a place to go. It gave him a role, a reason to set his alarm clock. The work wasn't glamorous sometimes. It was cleaning kennels and walking in the rain, but it mattered. He mattered. Have you ever considered lending your time to a cause you care about? It could be a library, a school, a community garden, or a food bank. Giving back has a remarkable way of giving us so much more in return. Moving the body, mending the mind, the power of a group. The volunteering gave John a foothold, but he still found the long afternoons and weekends isolating. His body felt stiff from inactivity, and his doctor had been gently nudging him to get more exercise for years. He hated the idea of a gym, with its loud music and complicated machines. But then he saw a flyer at the community center. The same place where he dropped off donated blankets for the shelter. It was for a senior walking club that met 3 times a week. Group exercise is another powerhouse strategy recommended by experts for both its physical and social perks. It boosts your mood by releasing endorphins, helps with mobility and balance, and, just as importantly, it creates a sense of community and shared motivation. John almost threw the flyer away. A walking club. It sounded so old. But then he thought about his doctor's advice and, more importantly, the crushing silence of his afternoons. He showed up the next Monday, feeling deeply self-conscious. He saw a group of about 10 people, all around his age, stretching and chatting. A woman with bright white hair and a welcoming smile introduced herself as Susan, the group's unofficial leader. Newcomer. "Welcome," she said, and the others murmured hellos. There was no pressure, no expectation. They just walked. But perhaps it's a gentle yoga class, a Tai Chi group in the park, or water aerobics. The key is the group setting. What's one activity you used to enjoy that you could maybe try again, this time with others? Reigniting old passions, building new friendships. As John's confidence grew, he started thinking about things he used to enjoy before life got so busy, before his career, before the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood. He remembered his love for woodworking. His garage was still full of old tools, gathering dust. He'd once spent hours in there, crafting small furniture, birdhouses, and toys for his kids. He pulled the dusty tarp off his old workbench. The familiar scent of sawdust filled the air. He ran his hand over the smooth, worn wood of his favorite hand plane. But the idea of starting a project alone felt, well, lonely. For him, the joy of creating had always been in the sharing. That's when he remembered his walking buddy, David, mentioning a men's shed in the next town over. It was a community workshop where men, mostly retired, could come together to work on projects, share skills, and just chat over a cup of coffee. It was part of a global movement designed specifically to combat social isolation in men. Visiting the shed felt like a big step. This wasn't just showing up for a walk. It was about sharing a skill, being part of something creative. He walked in to the sound of saws and sanding, the smell of wood and machine oil. A man with a thick gray beard looked up from a lathe and gave him a nod. "Come to build something, or just to drink the bad coffee?" he asked with a grin. John found his place there almost immediately. He started small, fixing a wobbly chair for the break room. Soon, he was helping another member design a bookshelf. He was teaching a younger retiree how to use a dovetail jig. He was also learning, picking up new techniques from men who had been master carpenters and cabinet makers. The shed became his creative outlet and his social hub. It was a space where his decades of experience were not just remembered, they were valued and useful. This is the magic of what community centers and hobby clubs do so well, whether it's a book club, a knitting circle, a painting class, or a community garden. These groups provide a powerful sense of belonging. They foster friendships built on common ground where conversations flow. John's hands were busy again, but more importantly, his heart was full. He was no longer just a widower or a retiree. He was a woodworker. He was a friend. He was a mentor. Is there an old hobby of yours, sitting on a shelf, gathering dust? Maybe it is time to see if there is a group of people nearby who share that same passion. Bridging the miles with modern tools while John was building a new local community for himself, he still felt a pang of sadness about the distance between him and his children. "Hi, Grandpa!" His 7-year-old granddaughter, Lily, squealed. It was a revelation. He could see the gap where her front tooth had fallen out. He could see the new poster on her bedroom wall. Sarah walked him through the house, showing him the garden they were planting. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was just hearing about their life. He felt like he was a part of it. Even from hundreds of miles away, this became a new ritual. Every Wednesday evening, they would have a video call. John would show Lily the birdhouse he was building in the shed. She would show him her latest drawing. It wasn't just a phone call. It was a visit. As he got more confident, Sarah showed him how to join online groups. He found a Facebook group for classic car enthusiasts, another of his old passions. He started sharing photos of the car he'd restored in his 20s, swapping stories with people from all over the world. Technology, which he once saw as a barrier, had become a bridge. Research shows that for seniors who get a little help with these tools, technology can significantly reduce loneliness, especially if mobility is a challenge. For many, like John, it's just about having a patient guide for that first step. John's story is a powerful reminder that a fulfilling life after 60 is not only possible, but is waiting to be built, one small step at a time. His journey was his own, but the principles are universal. We've walked through his steps from acknowledging his feelings and reconnecting with old friends to finding purpose in volunteering and embracing new hobbies and technologies. Now, it's your turn. Which of these steps resonates with you the most? Is there a small action you feel you could take this week? Maybe it's making that one phone call, looking up a local club, or even just sitting quietly and giving yourself permission to feel whatever you're feeling. Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story could be the very thing that encourages someone else to take their own first step. Reading through the shared experiences of others creates a community right here, reminding us that in this, we are truly not alone. John was once adrift in a sea of silent, empty days. The end of his career and the loss of his beloved wife had created a void he thought would consume him. He believed his story was over, but he was wrong. Today, at 70, John S.C. life is full. His weekly schedule is a tapestry woven with threads of connection. His walks with David and the club, his creative afternoons at the men's shed, his rewarding mornings with the shelter dogs, and his cherished video calls with his family. The silence in his home is no longer deafening. It's peaceful. It's the space he returns to after a day filled with purpose and people. His life isn't the same as it was with Mary. A part of him will always miss her, but he discovered that you can hold grief in one hand and joy in the other. He didn't replace what he lost. Instead, he built something new alongside it. He learned that life isn't a single, continuous story, but a series of books. And he had the power to start a new volume. John's journey shows us that overcoming loneliness isn't about one grand, heroic act. It's about the courage to take one small step and then another. It's about saying yes to a cup of coffee, to a walk in the park, to learning a new skill. Each step, no matter how small, is a vote for a more connected life. It's a declaration that your story is not over. There are still chapters left to write.